last session, we imagined what the actual process was for the killer to go into Galut. Today's passage asks, what happens if they leave? The conversation revolves around how to understand the phrase "Velo ein mishpat mavet" in Dvarim Yotet Vav. Pen yirdof goel hadam acharei harotzeach, lest the blood redeemer chase after the killer, ki yecham levavo, when his heart gets all fired up, vehisigo, and catch him, ki yirbeh haderech, when the way gets to be too long, vihikahu nafesh, and kills him, velo ein mishpat mavet, and he is not liable for death, ki lo sonehu mitmoshel shom, because he did not hate him previously. Is the velo ein mishpat mavet, and he was not liable for death, referring to the rotzeach, meaning to say he, the rotzeach, does not deserve to be killed by the goel hadam, because when he killed, it was not intentional and not out of enmity? Or is it possible that it should be read that he is not liable for death, meaning that the goel hadam is not now liable for death after he kills the rotzeach? This is the opinion of Rav Huna. If you leave the Ir Miklat, the goel hadam can kill you with impunity, velo ein mishpat mavet. Amar Rav Huna, rotzeach shagala le'ir miklat, v'mitza'o goel hadam v'harago patur. If a rotzeach is exiled to the Ir Miklat, and then the goel hadam finds him and kills him, the goel hadam is exempt. And then the Gemara explains, kasavar, Rav Huna must think, he must be basing himself on this pasuk, velo ein mishpat mavet, he does not have a death sentence, v'goel hadam hu dichtiv. This phrase, he is not liable for death, refers to the goel hadam, that when the goel hadam kills the rotzeach, the goel hadam is exempt. When the Gemara says kasavar, that he thinks, it is doing Rav Huna a favor, supplying a verse for Rav Huna. This is not Rav Huna himself speaking, and it's possible that he accepts the first reading of the verse and is relying on logic to support himself and has no verse, or perhaps he has a different verse to support himself. So if you happen to think that this reading of the verse is not the most plausible, and I would agree with you, that does not mean that you need to disagree with Rav Huna. Skipping ahead a bit to a quotation from our Mishnah, which is being brought to see if we can support or reject Rav Huna's position based on the language of our Mishnah. This is actually a very common move on the Gemara's part. It will quote a Mishnah with one interpretation, my love, is this not the right way to read the Mishnah? Which will support a given position, and then it will immediately reject it and say, lo, actually this is not the right reading. The pattern is quotation from the Mishnah, Tanan, theoretical interpretation, my love, and then lo, a rejection of that interpretation. There is never any reason given for why the first interpretation is the first one assumed or why it is then rejected. This is a purely rhetorical style, an exploration of possibilities. The interpretation is never justified, and neither is its rejection. So we begin with the Mishnah Tanan. We have in our Mishnah, Mosurin lo shnei talmidei chachamim. He is given 2 Torah scholars, Shema yehargenu baderech, lest the goel hadam kill him on the way. V'yidabru elav. And what are these Torah scholars going to do? They're going to do what Torah scholars are good at, and they're going to speak to him. And now we have the second piece. My love, is this not a case, dimatrube, where they, the Talmidei Chachamim, are warning the goel hadam, saying, De'i katil bar katalahu, that if he kills now, he is himself going to be liable for death. If the function of the Talmidei Chachamim is to warn the goel hadam that if he kills the rotzeach bishgaga, then he himself will be killed, that means that Rav Huna is wrong. If the goel hadam kills, he is not patur. Rather, he is liable for death. But As you already know, this reading is going to be rejected. No, this is not what's happening. They're not actually warning him that he is going to be liable for death. Kidetanya, v'yedaberu elav, they should speak to him, dvarim hareuyim lo, words that are appropriate for him. Omrim lo, they say to him, al tinhag bo minhag shofchei damim, don't treat him like the way that you would treat any killer. Bishkaga ba'ma'aseh liyado, this all happened by accident. This came to him, ba'liyado, accidentally. We now see that the Gemara has supported Rav Huna in two ways. First, they furnish him with a pasuk, velo ein mishpat mavet, where he can base his opinion. And second, they clarify that the correct reading of the Mishnah supports Rav Huna. The first reading of the Mishnah, where the Talmidei Chachamim are warning him that he'll be put to death, is rejected. And instead, the Talmidei Chachamim are just urging the Goel Hadam to be nice. And that's all they can do. Since were he to actually kill the Rotzeach, there would be no consequence. So Rav Huna is correct that if a Goel Hadam ends up killing the Rotzeach, the Goel Hadam is patur. He faces no consequences. Now we're going to continue in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir is going to disagree that it's the Talmidei Chachamim who speak. Rather, he's going to say it is the Rotzeach himself. Rabbi Meir Omer, Hu medaber al yedei atzmo. He speaks for himself. Shene'amar v'zeh devar harotzeach. This is the word, this is the speaking of the Rotzeach. This also supports the reading that the Talmidei Chachamim are asking for mercy. They're not delivering a legal warning, since the Rotzeach himself obviously can't deliver a legal warning. He can only plead for mercy. And then the rabbis say back to Rabbi Meir, Harbe shlichot oseh. A lot of sendings it does. As you saw on the source sheet, the response of Harbe shlichot oseh or Harbe shlichut oseh is very perplexing. According to the Ritva, the response of the rabbis here is technical. They say that the language of v'zeh devar harotzeach actually has a different mission. The verse has a lot of missions, as it were. It is needed to teach something else, and that is why they don't agree that the Rotzeach advocates for himself. The language of Zed Devar HaRotzeach has something else it needs to accomplish. It cannot accomplish what Rabbi Meir says it's doing, which is teaching us that the Rotzeach speaks for himself. According to Rashi, the response of the rabbis here is explanatory. There is a reason why they think that Talmidei Chachamim should do the speaking, rather than the Rotzeach himself. Harbe shlichut osa, having it done through shlichut, through representatives, is helpful. Even if he can advocate for himself, he will get a better result and have more mercy shown to him if someone else advocates for him. The Gemara then goes back to explore a component of the text it recently quoted, something that has tripped up a lot of Talmud students, including myself, over the years. Amar mar is a technical term for this strategy of going back to a component of the text. It does not mean that mar said. In the Mishnah, we imagine that the Torah scholars explain to the Goel Hadam that this person killed by accident, and therefore the Goel Hadam shouldn't kill him. Amar mar. So let's go back to that. Bishkaga ba'ma'aseh liyado. No, this happened by accident. It came to him, the incident came to his hand by accident. Pshita. It's obvious. Di'i b'mezid bar galut hu? But if he killed on purpose, he wouldn't be on his way to the Ir Miklat. He would not be subject to galut. So the question that the Gemara is asking here is, wait a minute. You're telling me that the information that the Talmidei Chachamim are giving is that this person is a Rotzeach Bishkaga? That information is already obvious. If this person is headed to the Ir Miklat, they must have killed by accident. Then the Gemara explains that in fact it's not clear that this person killed by accident. True, he's headed to the Ir Miklat, and true, that is where accidental killers go. But other killers will also go there to wait for their cases to be tried. Indeed, this is information. Vehatanya, because we have learned in Upraita, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, B'tchila echad shogeg ve'echad mezid makdimin la'arei miklat. Initially, both the person who kills by accident and the person who kills on purpose go to the Ir Miklat. Ubeitin sholchin umevi'in otam misham, and Beitin send and bring them back from there. Mi shenet chayev mita haraguhu, the one who was liable for death, they kill. Shene'amar v'shalchu ziknei iro v'lakchu oto misham. The elders of the city send out and then take him from there. V'natnu oto bi'ad goel hadam, and then they give him over to the goel hadam. Umeit, and he dies. Umi shelo nitchayav, and someone who was not obligated, not liable for death, patruhu, then they would send him away. Shene'amar v'hitzilu ha'eda et harotzeach mi'ad goel hadam, because in some cases, the Eda, the court, saves the Rotzeach from the Goel Hadam. And Mishinit Chayev Galut, and if it does happen to be this third scenario where somebody is liable for Galut, Machzirin Otolim Kamo, then they send him back to his place where he came from. Shenemar veheshivu oto ha'eda el ir miklato asher nas shama. They're going to return him to his city of refuge that he had already fled to. And Rebbe says, Me'atzman hein golin. Rebbe says, yeah, this is happening, where people who don't belong to the Ir Miklat go there. But that's not a good thing. That's not a procedural necessity. That's an oopsie. Kisvurin hein. They're under the impression, they think, echad shogeg ve'echad mezid kol tot. They think this is a magic city that's going to protect everybody from consequences, whether you're a shogeg or whether you're a mezid, kol tot, the cities are going to absorb you. Ve'hein einan yodin, and they don't know. Shebe shogeg kol tot, that it does protect you if you are a shogeg, but mezid einan kol tot. But when it comes to killing intentionally, they do not, in fact, protect. Rebbe responds, it's not that they must go there as a procedural necessity, it's that they do go there. But in any case, both of these opinions point to a reality that the Talmidei Chachamim do serve an informational purpose to the Goel Hadam. They can let him know, actually, this person is a Rotzeach Bishgaga, and is therefore someone they cannot touch. I wanted to take this opportunity to reflect for a moment on this character of the Goel Hadam. A crazed family member bent on revenge because he is angry and grieving is unlikely to listen to a plea for compassion by either the Talmidei Chachamim or the Rotzeach himself. The Mishnah's assumption that this tactic might be effective could teach us something about the Goel Hadam. It is also quite possible that the Goel Hadam is someone who thinks it is his duty, thinks it is right to avenge the death in his family. He isn't acting out of emotion. He's acting out of a sense of propriety and wanting to get justice. In that case, it actually would be effective for him to hear that this would be the wrong way to get justice, that the killer is not liable for death, and the Goel Hadam would be better serving the cause of justice by having compassion and letting the Rotzeach go in peace. In this session, we learned about leaving the Ir Miklat inappropriately, right? What happens if I leave the Ir Miklat and I'm vulnerable because I haven't served out my sentence? In the next session, we'll talk about the death of the Kohen Gadol. We'll talk about how a person's sentence in the Ir Miklat ends, at which point the person would be free to go.